My daughter said it at Sunday dinner, between the salad and the main course, in the particular tone she uses when she has been thinking about something for a while and has decided the time has come to say it. Mom, you really should think about retiring soon, Claire said. We've been talking about it, and honestly, the kids need consistency. They need a grandparent figure who's there. Daycare is so expensive, and you'd be so good at it. I was in the middle of pouring water into my glass. I finished pouring. I set the pitcher down. I said, "We've been talking about it?" She glanced at her husband, Derek, who was looking at his salad with the focused attention of a man who has been part of a conversation he is now less certain he wants to be associated with. "Derek and I," she said, "we've been looking at the costs, and it just makes financial sense. You'd have the grandkids every day. It would be wonderful for everyone." "I see," I said. "You're 62, she said, with the gentle reasonableness of someone delivering information they believe the other person needs. "That's not that far from retirement age anyway, and your pension kicks in at 65. 3 years isn't that long." I looked at my daughter. She looked back at me with the open, expectant face of someone who has just proposed something logical and is waiting for the other person to recognize its logic. I nodded. I passed the bread. I said, "Let me think about it." What I was thinking about in the moment was a job posting I had seen 3 weeks earlier, a position at a university on the other side of the country, a position I had looked at for 30 seconds and closed, because 62-year-old women with good lives in familiar places do not generally restart their careers in cities they have never lived in. Except that apparently I was going to be retired soon so that my daughter could save money on childcare. "Let me think about it," I said, and I meant it. By the following Thursday, I had applied for the position. By the following month, I had been offered it. By March, I was packing boxes. Welcome to Alpha Mom Stories, where free is never actually free. Stay with me until the very end, because this story is not the one you think it is from the opening. And the woman I became on the other side of this move is someone I want to introduce you to properly. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment. I read everyone, and I especially want to hear from you on this one. My name is Margaret Chen. I am 63 years old. For 37 years, I was an urban planner, the kind who works in housing policy, specifically the kind of housing policy that makes it possible for ordinary people to afford to live in cities that would otherwise price them out. I spent 37 years in rooms where decisions were made about who gets to be part of a city and who gets pushed to the edges, and I advocated, persistently and sometimes unpopularly, for the people on the edges. I was good at my work. I was respected in my field. I had spent 3.5 decades building expertise and reputation and relationships, and the particular satisfaction that comes from work that matters beyond the doing of it. I was not, by any reasonable measure, a woman whose next logical step was free childcare. I need to tell you about who I am before I tell you the rest, because this story requires you to understand something about the person at its center. Not to make me sympathetic, though I hope I am, but because the specifics of who I am are the reason the move made sense, and the reason it made sense is the most important thing in the story. I am a woman who built a career in a field that was, when I entered it in the 1980s, not particularly welcoming to women and even less welcoming to women of color, and even less than that to women of color who had opinions and stated them. I built it anyway. Not because I was exceptional. I think I was capable and determined and sometimes lucky. But because I understood early that if I was going to be in the room, I was going to be in it on my own terms. That principle had governed 37 years of my professional life. It had governed my marriage to Thomas, which lasted 21 years until his death 8 years ago, and which was a partnership in the fullest sense. Two people who both had terms and who found, to their mutual surprise and pleasure, that the terms were compatible. It had governed the raising of my 2 children, Claire and my son William, who is 34 and lives in Seattle, and who called me the week after the Sunday dinner and said, "Please tell me you're not actually going to do this," I said. "Define this," he said. "Retire and babysit her children for free for the next 15 years. I said, "No, I am not going to do that." He exhaled. "Good," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm working on it," I said. I want to tell you about the year before Sunday dinner, because the Sunday dinner did not arrive without a road. It never does. Claire is 38. She is my eldest, my daughter, my child, who has always had the quality of moving toward what she wants with a directness that I spent her childhood alternately admiring and being exhausted by. She is an attorney, which suited her well, and she is a mother of 2, Iris, who is 4, and Benjamin, who is 2, and she loves those children in the fierce, overwhelmed, sometimes panicked way of a woman who is doing a demanding job and raising small children and trying to hold the whole architecture of her life together without anything giving way. I understood her situation. I want to say that before anything else because it matters. I understood the pressure she was under. Childcare in her city costs more than rent did when I was her age. Her hours are long. Derek, her husband, is also an attorney, and his hours are also long. The children are small, and the days are short, and the demands are constant. And I knew, because I had lived a version of it when I was raising Claire and William on a planner's salary while Thomas was building his business, that the arithmetic of two working parents and small children does not ever quite add up. I had been helping in the ways I could. The extra days I drove up when they needed coverage, the weeks during school breaks when I took the children, the flexibility I had built into my work schedule, specifically so that I could be available when they needed me. I had done this willingly. I want to be clear about that. I had not done it under protest or with resentment or as a favor that I was counting. I had done it because Iris and Benjamin are the people in my life who produce in me the specific and unreasonable joy that only grandchildren produce. And because being with them was something I chose as happily as anything I chose. What I had not chosen and what I had not agreed to was to be retired for the purpose. There is a difference between helping from abundance and being positioned as infrastructure. I had been helping from abundance, from the fullness of a life that included work I loved and grandchildren I adored and the freedom to move between them as I chose. What Claire's Sunday dinner proposal would have produced was something else. It would have produced a woman who was no longer a planner, no longer a professional, no longer someone with a field and a reputation and the forward motion that work gives a person. A woman who was, instead, the childcare solution, available, scheduled, free. This is the thing I need you to understand, and I am going to say it as plainly as I know how. When you retire someone for free childcare, you are not giving them a gift. You are taking something. You are taking the work, which is not just money. It is identity and structure, and the sense that you are a person in the world in your own right, not only in relation to other people. You are taking the choice, which is the most important thing. The thing that separates the grandmother who spends her days with grandchildren from the grandmother who is assigned to spend her days with grandchildren. You are taking the future, because a woman who retires at 62 to provide free childcare is a woman whose professional life is over, whose network stops growing, whose expertise begins to atrophy, whose options narrow in the way that options narrow when you step out of a moving stream. I had watched this happen to other women, good, capable, remarkable women who were eased into the support role by family logistics and the cultural current that said, of course you'll help, and who woke up at 70 in a life that had been redirected without their full participation. I was not going to watch it happen to me. So I looked at the job posting again. The position was Director of Housing Policy at a university in Portland, Oregon. It was a role I would not have been surprised to see advertised 15 years earlier. It was the kind of position that comes around once or twice in a field, the kind that lets you shape the next generation of people who do the work. I had spent 37 years doing the work. I knew what the next generation needed to learn. I had thoughts about it, specific and accumulated thoughts, that I had been having for a decade and had not yet had a formal platform to express. The posting had been sitting in a folder on my browser since the Monday after the Sunday dinner. I had opened it approximately 6 times in 3 weeks and closed it each time. On the Thursday after the Sunday dinner, I opened it and did not close it. I want to tell you about the application, because there was a moment in it that I keep coming back to. I was writing the cover letter, the part where you describe what you bring and why you want the role and what you would do with it. I have written cover letters before. You do not spend 37 years in any field without accumulating documents of self-presentation. But I had not written one in many years, and I found that the process of writing it, of articulating on paper what I had to offer and what I wanted, was doing something I hadn't anticipated. It was reminding me who I was, not in a dramatic way. Quietly, as you write, and the sentences appear and you read them back and think, yes, that is accurate, that is what I know, that is what I can do. The way a muscle reminds you it exists when you use it after a period of not using it. Not the dramatic pain of something injured, the satisfying ache of something that has been there all along, waiting. I finished the letter. I submitted the application. I went to bed. I did not tell Claire. Not from secrecy exactly, but because I had nothing to tell yet. I had applied for a job. That was all. The rest was not yet real. 2 weeks later, they called to schedule an interview. The interview was by video first, then in person. I flew to Portland on a Tuesday in January, which meant flying from my home on the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest in the deep of winter, which I had not done before, and which produced in me, as the plane descended over the mountains, a feeling I did not expect. Not anxiety, not the nervousness of a woman 62 years old interviewing for a position that would require her to start over in a new city. Something more like alertness, the specific heightened attention of a person who has walked into a room that is interesting and wants to see all of it. The interview went well. This is not false modesty softened with the truth. It genuinely went well, in the way that things go when you know the material completely, and the people across the table are asking real questions, and you have real answers that have been forming for 37 years. The department chair was a woman about 10 years younger than me who asked one question that I have thought about since. What do you know now that you wish you'd known at 30? I talked for 12 minutes. She took notes. They offered me the position 3 weeks later. I sat in my kitchen with the offer letter on the table, and I looked at it for a long time. Then I called William. I got the job, I said. A pause. What job? A job in Portland, I said. Director of Housing Policy at Pacific Northwest University. It's a significant position. It's the kind of position I would have considered significant at any point in my career. A longer pause. Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, I said. You applied for a job in Portland, Oregon. 3 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't have anything to tell yet. Mom. He paused. Are you going to take it? I looked at the offer letter. I thought about the interview, the mountains from the plane, the department chair, and her 12 minutes of notes. I thought about the cover letter and the muscle memory of knowing who I was. Yes, I said. I think I am. Good, William said. And he said it the way he had said good on the phone 3 weeks earlier, when I told him I wasn't going to retire and babysit Claire's children for free. The same word, the same quality, like a hand placed firmly on a table. Good, that is the right thing. Go. Now I have to tell you about telling Claire. I want to tell you this accurately, without making it more or less than it was, because I think it is the part of this story that many of you will have the most to say about, and I want to give you the truth of it. I drove to Claire's house on a Saturday. I had called ahead, which I always do, and said I wanted to come by and talk. She was home. The children were there, which I had expected, and I spent the first hour with Iris and Benjamin, who are 4 and 2 and who require a grandmother's full attention in the way that is the most demanding and the most worthwhile thing I know. After the children's nap, Claire and I sat at her kitchen table. She looked at me with the anticipatory expression of someone who has been waiting for a decision she believes she already knows. I said, I've been thinking about what you said at dinner. She nodded. I know it's a big ask, she said, already in the mode of managing my concerns. But it really would be the best thing for everyone. You could move closer. There's actually a nice condo community about 15 minutes from us. Claire, I said. She stopped. I've accepted a job, I said. A director position at Pacific Northwest University in Portland, Oregon. I start in March. The silence in Claire's kitchen was a specific quality of silence that I have encountered before. In planning meetings, when I have said something that entirely resets the parameters of the conversation. The silence of a map being redrawn. Portland, she said. Oregon, yes. You applied for a job? 3 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't have anything definitive to say until I had an offer. She was looking at me the way people look at something when they need to adjust their understanding of it. Completely. When the version they had was wrong in a foundational way. You're moving, she said. Not a question. Understanding settling. In March, I said. A pause. Then, quieter than I expected, more honest than she usually allows herself. Because of what I said at dinner, I looked at my daughter. 38 years old. The same directness she has always had, which I gave her credit for. She went right to the thing, which is her way. Not only because of that, I said. Because the job is real and it is the right job. But the dinner it clarified something for me. About what I wanted. About what I was at risk of losing. She was quiet for a long time. I didn't mean it the way it sounds, she said. How do you mean it? She looked at the table. We're drowning, Mom. The costs, the schedule, I look at you and you have this flexibility and this freedom and we're underwater and I thought. She stopped. I thought you might want to be needed. I sat with that for a moment. Claire, I said, I am needed. I have been needed by my work for 37 years, and I will be needed by this job, and I am needed by you and the children in the ways that I can give. What I am not is available to be the solution to a financial problem I didn't create. And I need you to understand the difference between those two things. She looked up. I love Iris and Benjamin, I said. I will be in their lives. I will visit, and I will have them visit, and I will be the grandmother I want to be, which is a real grandmother with a real life who loves them and chooses to be with them. Not a childcare arrangement, not a line in a budget. A silence. Portland is far, she said. It is, I said. It's also a real city with real housing challenges, and a department that needs what I know. And I am 62 years old, and there is not an unlimited supply of moments when someone offers you work that matters. I am not going to decline it because it's inconvenient for a childcare calculation. What happened was that Claire cried. Not dramatically, she is not a dramatic crier, but genuinely, in the way of someone who has been exhausted for a long time and has just had the solution they were counting on removed. I sat with her while she cried. I did not take it back. I did not soften it. I gave her the full weight of what was true, that I was going, that it was the right thing, that the children and I would have a relationship, that I loved her, that her drowning was real and I was sorry I could not be the life preserver in the form she had imagined. Derek came home in the middle of it. He assessed the room with the quick accuracy of a man who has walked into difficult situations often enough to read them fast. He looked at me. He looked at Claire. He sat down. She's moving to Portland, Claire said. Derek looked at me. I held his look steadily. He said, Is it a good job? I said, It's a very good job. He nodded. He put his hand on Claire's hand. He said to her quietly, "We'll figure it out," which is what he should have said. Which is what they should have been saying all along, to themselves, about the childcare. "We'll figure it out," instead of retrofitting the solution onto her mother's retirement. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen. I looked at the offer letter still on the table. I said out loud to the kitchen, to Thomas, who has been gone for 8 years but who I still talk to in the late evenings when the house is quiet, "I'm doing it." I could feel him thinking this was right. I could feel it the way you feel things from people who knew you completely and are no longer there to say them. "I'm doing it," I said again. March came faster than I expected, the way the things you've decided tend to come, with a momentum that belongs to decisions already made, where the future pulls you forward because you've pointed yourself at it. I packed the house in 3 weeks. Not everything. I kept the house, rented it to a young couple who worked in the city, and needed exactly what I had, which was a comfortable old house in a good neighborhood. I took what I needed for a smaller life in a new city, which turned out to be less than I expected. Thomas would have found this funny. He always said I owned too many books and too many coats and too little of anything else, which was accurate, and the books and the coats came to Portland with me. William flew in to help with the last week of packing. He slept in the guest room, and we stayed up too late 2 nights in a row talking, the way we used to when he was in his 20s and came home for holidays, and we would sit at the kitchen table after everyone else was in bed and just talk. He is the easier one in some ways, William. Not because he requires less of me, but because he asks more of himself. Because he has always been the child who checked his own assumptions before presenting them as conclusions. On the last evening, with the boxes stacked and the rooms half bare, he said, "Are you scared?" I thought about it honestly. "A little," I said. "Not of the job. Of the alone." "You've been alone here," he said, "since Dad." "I've been alone here with everything familiar," I said. "It's different." He nodded. He understood that. He is a person who has chosen unfamiliar things on purpose and knows what that costs. "You're going to be remarkable at this," he said. "I know," I said. Because I did know, and false modesty at 62 is not a luxury I can afford. He laughed. He is his father's son. Portland in March is gray and wet and full of flowers that bloom earlier than they have any right to, the cherry blossoms and the magnolias showing up in the rain, with a cheerfulness that seems almost argumentative. I arrived on a Tuesday, and the moving company was there on Wednesday, and by the end of the first week I had a bed and a kitchen that worked, and the books on shelves and the coats in the closet, and the particular quality of quiet that belongs to a new place. Not the familiar quiet of a house, but the interesting quiet of one you're learning. The university was 15 minutes by bike. I discovered this on my first weekend, riding the city in the careful way of someone who is mapping a new territory. The coffee places and the grocery and the park by the river, and the way the streets feel different in different neighborhoods. I had not ridden a bike regularly since my 40s. The body remembered. The city was easy to learn. The department was 8 people when I arrived, not including me. The chair, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, whom I had interviewed with and who had asked the 12-minute question, met me at the door on my first day with coffee and the direct manner of a person who respects time. "I want to tell you what I hope for this year," she said, before we'd reached the conference room. "I'd like to hear it," I said. She told me. "The students who needed a certain kind of mentorship, not the academic kind, which they could get anywhere, but the kind that comes from someone who has been in rooms where actual decisions get made. The policy research that had stalled for lack of someone with the practitioner's perspective. The relationships with the city's housing agencies that had been cordial but not substantive. She told me what she needed, and she told me what she was giving me to do it with, and she told me what she expected. By the end of the first meeting, I understood why she had taken 12 minutes of notes. She was right about all of it. In the first month, I taught my first seminar. 23 graduate students, the best of whom reminded me sharply of myself at 28, and the rest of whom reminded me of the various people who had been in rooms with me over the years. The careful ones, the loud ones, the ones who ask the question that reframes everything, the ones who are afraid to ask any question at all yet. I ran the seminar the way I had always believed seminars should be run, which is as a conversation between people who all have something to teach each other, and none of whom should be passive. By the third week, one of the students told me after class that she had not, in 2 years of graduate school, felt that her actual opinions were being sought. I said, "They are. Come to office hours." She came. She came every week for the rest of the semester. She is now doing her thesis on mixed-income housing policy with me as her advisor, and she is, in my professional assessment, genuinely exceptional, the kind of person who will be in rooms in 20 years, where decisions get made, changing them. That is what I came here to do. In the second month, I connected with the city's Office of Housing and Community Development, which had been a relationship the department wanted and hadn't built. I knew people in that network. 37 years of work leaves a wide trail of connections, and within 2 months I had 3 active research partnerships and a standing invitation to the monthly policy briefing that the department chair called the most significant institutional development of the year. I was not coasting. I was running, in the way that you run when you're doing the right thing in the right place at the right time, when the effort and the output feel aligned. I went to Portland concerts and Portland restaurants and a hiking group that met on Saturday mornings and that I joined at Williams' insistence and that has produced the most unexpected development of the year, which is a group of 6 people ranging from 45 to 70 who hike every Saturday and have dinner together afterward, and who are now, without my having planned it or anticipated it, the closest thing to a social community I have built as an adult outside of my work. One of them is a woman named Patricia, 67, who was a federal judge for 20 years, and who retired deliberately and on her own terms, and who has opinions about the experience of women in their 60s that she delivers with the precision of someone who has spent decades weighing evidence. First time I told her the Claire story, the dinner, the free babysitter proposal, the job posting, she looked at me with an expression I can only describe as judicial recognition. They believe it's a compliment, she said. That's the part that's hardest to explain. They genuinely believe that being wanted for your capacity to serve is the same as being valued for who you are. Yes, I said. That's exactly it. And you moved across the country. She nodded. Good, she said. Not judgment, recognition. Claire came in September. Not to fight, not to negotiate, not to revisit the Sunday dinner or the March conversation or any of the ground we had covered before. She came with Iris, who was by then 4.5 and at the age where new places are adventures that require full documentation. And they came on a Thursday and stayed through Sunday, and I showed them Portland, the Saturday market and the Rose Garden and the River Walk, and the particular quality of Pacific Northwest light in September that is nothing like East Coast light, and that I had spent 6 months learning to love. On the Saturday evening, after Iris was in bed in the guest room, Claire and I sat on the small deck outside my apartment. The city sounds below, and the clear September sky, and the particular contentment of a day that had been full and easy. Claire said, I didn't know you wanted this. I said, which part? She gestured at the apartment at the city. This, a new place, the job. I thought you were settled. I thought you were content. I was content, I said. Content is not the same as done. She was quiet for a moment. I think I assumed you had finished wanting things, she said. For yourself, I mean. Outside of us. I looked at my daughter. The directness, still there. The exhaustion I had seen at the Sunday dinner, slightly less. Derek and she had hired a nanny. Not without difficulty, not without budget sacrifice. But they had figured it out, the way you figure things out when there is no other option. Claire, I said, I am going to be wanting things for myself until I can't want things anymore. That is not going to stop because I'm 62 or 65 or 75. The wanting is what I am. She looked at me a long look. Dad was like that, she said. He always wanted something. A project or a trip or a new thing he was reading about. Yes, I said. That was one of the reasons I married him. I thought when he died. She stopped. I think I thought it went away when he did. The wanting. It doesn't work that way, I said. The wanting is yours. It comes from inside. Thomas's death changed everything else. It didn't change that. She was quiet for a while. The city below, the September sky. I'm sorry, she said. About what I said at dinner. About the babysitter thing. I know, I said. I was drowning, and I thought the answer was you, and I didn't think about what it would mean for you, because I think I stopped seeing you as someone with a meaning for yourself. I saw you as someone with a meaning for us. She paused. That was wrong. I reached across and put my hand over hers. The same hand gesture I have made at tables for 38 years with this particular person, the same hand that helped her learn to walk and held hers when Thomas died and that she held in the delivery room for both children. You are my daughter, I said, and you are 38 years old and you are underwater and I love you. What I am also is a person. Those things coexist. They have always coexisted. I need you to hold both. She turned her hand over and held mine. Okay, she said. I'm holding both. We sat on the deck until nearly midnight. We talked about Thomas, which we don't do often enough, both of us guilty of the particular way that grief makes people protect themselves by protecting each other. We talked about her marriage, which was in a better place than it had been. The nanny had relieved a pressure, the budget was tight but manageable. Derek had taken on more of the domestic load in ways that 6 months of necessity had produced. We talked about Iris, who had told me that afternoon with the authority of a 4-year-old that Portland smells different from home, and that she preferred the smell. What does she say it smells like? I asked. Rain and trees, Claire said. She's not wrong. No, I said. She's not. Iris and Benjamin come to Portland for 2 weeks every summer now. This is the arrangement that emerged not from negotiation but from Iris, specifically, who announced at the end of the September trip that she was going to come back, and that Grandma Margaret was going to take her to the Rose Garden again, and also to the market with the man who sells the honey. I have agreed to all of this. The 2 weeks are something I plan all year. Not in the anxious way of someone managing an obligation, but in the way of someone who has something to look forward to that is genuinely worth the looking forward. I plan the market trips and the river walks and the cooking, because I cook with them the way the best grandmothers cook, as transmission, as the passing of something from one set of hands to the next. Iris has learned to make my mother's scallion pancakes. She is 5 years old, and she pats the dough with the seriousness of someone doing important work, which she is. Benjamin assists by adding the sesame oil at the designated moment, which he considers his primary contribution and which he carries out with a gravity that makes me have to turn away briefly so he doesn't see me smiling. I am their grandmother. I am the one they visit in the city that smells like rain and trees. I am the one who takes them to the rose garden and the Saturday market and the honeyman. I am the one who teaches them the scallion pancakes and who sends them home with the recipe written in my handwriting and who calls on Sunday evenings and asks about school and friends and what they're reading. I am their grandmother. I am also the director of housing policy at Pacific Northwest University, which is the job I was meant to have at this stage of my career, and I go to work on Monday mornings with the feeling of someone who is exactly where she's supposed to be. Those two things are both true. Both of them are me. Here is what I want you to know. You are not infrastructure. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how convenient it would be for the people around you if you were. I don't care how reasonable the argument sounds when it's made. And sometimes it sounds very reasonable, the way Claire's argument sounded, framed in the language of family and love and what's best for everyone. You are not infrastructure. You are a person with wants and work and expertise and forward motion and a future that belongs to you to build. Retirement is not an obligation you incur when your children need childcare. It is a choice you make, on your terms, when you are ready to make it. If you are ready, if you genuinely want to stop working and spend your days with grandchildren and that is the life that fills you, then do that. Choose it. Choose it fully, from abundance, with your whole self. That is beautiful and real. But if you are not ready, if there is work left that matters, if there is a job posting on your browser that you have opened 6 times and closed, because 62-year-old women in familiar places do not generally restart their careers in cities they have never lived in, then I want to ask you to open it one more time and not close it. The wanting is yours. It came from inside. It does not stop because someone else's need would be more conveniently served if it did. I am in my office in Portland on a Thursday afternoon in November, and outside the window it is raining, which it does with great commitment in Portland in November, and the cherry trees have lost their leaves and the city is gray and wet, and completely itself. And I am at my desk with a student's thesis draft and a cup of tea and the particular satisfaction of a woman who is doing exactly what she is supposed to be doing with exactly this part of her one life. Iris is coming for Christmas. She has requested the scallion pancakes and the honey from the man at the market and the rose garden, which will not have roses in December, but which she has decided she wants to see anyway, because she wants to know what it looks like without them. I have told her it looks beautiful. She has told me she wants to see for herself. She is 5 years old. She already knows that wanting to see for yourself is the right answer. She gets this from me. Welcome to Portland. Drop a comment. Tell me about the job posting you opened and closed. Tell me about the moment you stopped being infrastructure and became a person again. I am here. I read everything. And subscribe, because the thesis drafts are on my desk, and the tea is hot, and the rain is doing its thing against the window, and I will be back next week to tell you about the student who came to office hours and is going to change housing policy in this country, and what she said to me last Tuesday, that I have thought about every day since. The wanting doesn't stop. Don't let anyone tell you it should. I want to go back to the cover letter. I mentioned it briefly, the 12 minutes of writing, the muscle memory of knowing who I was. I moved past it quickly in the telling, because the story needed to keep moving, but the cover letter deserves more than it was given, because it was the most important thing that happened in the 3 weeks between Sunday's dinner and the application submission, and I think many of you will understand why. When I sat down to write it on that Thursday afternoon, I had not written a professional document of self-presentation in 6 years, not since Thomas died. I had not needed to. I was in a position, and the position was secure, and the word retirement had been floating in the air of my future in the vague way of something that exists on the horizon and hasn't yet required direct attention. The dinner put it into sharp focus, not in the way Claire intended. What came into focus was not the horizon of retirement, but the horizon of the alternative, of a life not yet done, of work not yet completed, of a specific and accumulated expertise that had not yet been given its final and best use. What the dinner clarified, with an efficiency I did not thank Claire for at the time and have since, in private, acknowledged was what I was at risk of. I sat down to write the letter, and the first line came out wrong. It came out in the apologetic register that women of a certain age are trained into. The register that begins by acknowledging the presumption of applying, that pre-defends against objections not yet raised. That explains itself before it has been questioned. I deleted it. I started again. The second version was better. It said what I had done, what I knew. It said it without apology and without excess, in the way that you describe a fact. Not boastfully, not shrinkingly, just, this is what is true about me, and this is what I can do with it, and this is what I intend. I wrote for 2 hours. When I read it back, I felt something I had not felt in a professional context in a long time, something that I want to describe accurately because I think it matters. I felt like myself, not my daughter's mother, not Thomas's widow, not the grandmother of Iris and Benjamin, though I am all of those things, and they are not small things. Myself in the first person, singular, professional, specific. A person with 37 years of particular and hard-won knowledge about how cities work and who gets to be in them and why it matters. That was in the cover letter. That was what the cover letter gave back to me. I submitted it at 9:15 on a Thursday evening, and then I made dinner and watched a documentary about migratory birds, which is a thing I do sometimes on Thursday evenings, and I did not think about the letter again until the phone rang 2 weeks later. I want to tell you about something that happened 6 months into the Portland job that I have not told you yet. I was in a city council meeting, not the Pacific Northwest University's council, Portland City Council. I had been invited as an expert witness in a housing affordability hearing, which is the kind of thing I spent the last decade of my East Coast career doing, and which I was being asked to do here, now that the city's housing office had come to know the department's work. I was prepared. I am always prepared. That particular habit has not softened with age, and I said what I knew about the housing data and the policy options and the trade-offs, and I answered questions, and the council member asking them was sharp, and made me sharper in return. After the hearing, in the hallway, a young woman approached me. She was in her late 20s, professional, carrying a legal pad that was covered in notes. She said, "Dr. Chen, I've been following your work since I was in graduate school. Your paper on mixed income integration in transit corridors changed how I think about my job." I thanked her. She said, "I didn't know you were in Portland now. I'm the deputy director of the city's housing program." I said, "I know. I've been hoping we'd meet." We met for coffee the following week. She is 29 years old, and she is going to be extraordinary. She already is, actually, in the way of people who are extraordinary early and will more so as the years accumulate and give them room to operate. We have met every 3 weeks since then. It is not a formal mentorship. Neither of us has named it that. It is two people who are interested in the same problems and who are at different stages of engaging with them, and who are both, in their different ways, the better for the conversation. This is what I came here to do. Not only the seminar and the thesis advising and the policy research, though all of those are real and all of them matter. This, the conversation in the coffee shop, the questions that help someone understand what they already know, the passing of the network, the name, the door. This is what 37 years of work produces when it is given a place to go. I was almost retired. I was almost removed from this room by a Sunday dinner proposal that was made with love and without malice and without any understanding of what it was proposing to take. Claire has surprised me. In the year since the Sunday dinner, since the Portland move, since the September visit, Claire has surprised me, not with a grand gesture or a significant statement, with the accumulation of small things that tell you a person has thought about something and is acting on what they learned. She calls on Tuesday evenings now. Not Sunday afternoons when the week is either winding down or panicked, but Tuesday evenings when the children are in bed and she has a glass of wine and 45 minutes of quiet. We talk not about logistics, not about the schedule or the visits or what I can do for them, about things. Her work, which is interesting and which I have never known well enough. My work, which she asks about with genuine curiosity. Not the polite interest version, but the actual version. About Thomas sometimes. About who we each are in the years since Thomas. Last Tuesday, she asked me about the housing policy paper I was working on. Not the summary version, the actual version. What the research question was, how I was approaching it, what the complications were. I talked for 20 minutes. She asked follow-up questions. I am 63 years old and my daughter is 38 years old, and we are, finally and imperfectly, and in the middle of a Tuesday evening phone call, becoming people to each other. Not the mother-daughter template. People. This is what the move gave me. Not only Portland, not only the job, not only Patricia and the hiking group and the September light on the river and the student who comes to office hours and the deputy director with her legal pad in the city council hallway. The move gave me back to my daughter. By removing myself as the available solution, I made space for her to see me as something else. As a person with a Tuesday evening's worth of things to say about housing policy, with a student who is going to change the field, with a city that smells like rain and trees, and that I have learned to love in the specific way you love a place that chose you back. She sees me now, not as infrastructure, as Margaret. I want to end with William, because he has been in this story at the edges, and he deserves a paragraph of his own. William called me last month on a Sunday afternoon. He had been in Portland for a conference. He works in environmental law, and he'd been too busy to see me during the week, but he had one Sunday free before his flight, and he came and we walked the river, ate at the fish place by the market, and sat for 2 hours in a coffee shop, watching the rain come in off mountains. At one point he said, "You look different than you did last year." I said, "How?" He thought about it. He has his father's way of taking questions seriously, of not producing the quick answer when the right answer requires more time. "You look like you're in the right place," he said. "Not just geographically. Like you're in the right." He paused. "Like the thing you're doing, and the place you're doing it, and the person you are have all lined up. It's visible." I looked at my son across the coffee shop table, 34 years old, thoughtful, his father's deliberateness and his own particular sharpness. "It's visible," I said, "because it's real." He nodded. He picked up his coffee. "Dad would have loved this city," he said. "He would have," I said. "He would have been on the hiking trail by the second week." William smiled. "He would have been trail captain by the third." We sat with Thomas for a minute, which is what we do when he comes up in the conversation. We sit with him, let him be there, don't rush past it. Then William said, "I'm glad you took the job." "I know," I said, "and I'm glad you didn't just," he paused. "I'm glad you didn't let it happen, the retirement. The other version of this year." "I'm glad too," I said. "What would you have done if you hadn't seen the posting?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know," I said. "I'd like to think I would have found another way, that I would have resisted without the specific pull of a specific opportunity. But I don't know. Sometimes you need the door to be visible before you can walk through it." He nodded. "Good thing you had the browser open." "Good thing," I said. "She gets it from me. I paid for the coffees." We walked to the river one more time before his flight. The wanting doesn't stop. Don't let anyone tell you it should. Drop a comment. Tell me about the browser tab you have open. Tell me about the thing you want that you haven't let yourself want yet. I am here. I read every one of you. And I will be back next week, at my desk, with the thesis drafts and the tea and the Portland rain, which is not a hardship but a character. The city's way of being entirely itself, which is the only way I know to be. Subscribe because the door is there. Open it. One more thing. And then I am done. I have been thinking about what to call what happened at Sunday dinner. Not Claire's intention. Her intention was love, imperfect and exhausted and financially anxious, but love. I am not disputing that. I am thinking about the structure of it, the shape of the thing that was proposed. What was proposed was a substitution. Margaret the professional would be replaced by Margaret the available. The calendar of a working life, with its commitments and its travel and its meetings and its forward motion, would be replaced by the calendar of a retired grandmother, open, flexible, structured around others' needs, a resource to be allocated. It was proposed as an upgrade. More time with the grandchildren, less stress, a gentle landing into the next chapter. What it actually was a subtraction, and the thing being subtracted was me, not my love for the children, not my relationship with Claire or my investment in her life. Those were not being subtracted and would not have been. What was being subtracted was the part of me that is not a grandmother, and not a mother, and not a widow, and not a daughter, and not a member of any relational category. The part that is a planner and a researcher and a mentor and a colleague and a person who goes to Portland City Council hearings and comes back with 3 pages of notes and a new connection and the specific satisfaction of work that lands. That part, the part that has no family name for it, that is the part they forget about, not from cruelty, from a category error. They look at a woman of 62, and they see the grandmother shape and the available shape and the not retired yet shape, and they think, here is a resource being underutilized. Here is something that could be put to better use. They do not see the rest, the 37 years of the rest, the cover letter version of the rest, the 12 minutes of notes the department chair took. This is what I want to say to you if you are standing in a Sunday dinner where the argument sounds reasonable and the love is real and you are being offered an erasure in the language of family need. You are not being underutilized. You are being used correctly for what you are. And what you are is not reducible to what you can do for other people. You are also, simultaneously, non-negotiably, regardless of what anyone else's childcare situation requires, a person with work left to do, with things left to know and learn and build and give, with a future that belongs to you to inhabit on your own terms in the form that suits you in whatever city you choose, Portland or otherwise. Open the browser tab. The department chairs are out there taking 12 minutes of notes. They are waiting for the cover letter that says what you have, without apology, in the voice of someone who knows what she is. Write it. I will see you next week.